Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the next normal webinar, Resilience in the Storm of Change. Before we begin, please register your attendance in the attendance form provided by the link in the chat box below, or sign in via scanning the QR code. As before, please be aware of the housekeeping rules which I mentioned earlier during the start of the event. I know for sure you don't want to be kept wanting. And I know everyone is anxious for the next part of the webinar. So now we move on to our second session entitled, The Call for Decent Work, a Right Delayed Should Not Be a Right Denied. The main takeaway key points for this session would be focused on the importance of decent work, issue of income equality, rights at work, the consequences and short-term and long-term actions. Now, for this session, we have Mr. Ong Jiken as our moderator and Ms. Izana Saleh, Dr. Mustafa Kamal, and Ms. Nur Shafika Pabir as our speaker panelists. Before we begin, allow me to give a brief introduction on our moderator and speaker panelists. Our moderator, Mr. Ong Jiken, is a second-year undergraduate student from History Department, University of Malaya, majoring in Malaysian and Southeast Asian historical subjects of various fields, including business and economy. Now, our speakers panelist, Ms. Nur Shafika, is a senior job coach for the Enabling Academy, Yayasan Gamuda. Before being a job coach, she worked with children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder as an applied behavior analyst therapist for 4 years and ABA case supervisor for a year in a private center autism link. Ms. Izana Saleh is an independent non-executive director at Talent Corporation Malaysia, Berhad, which drives Malaysia's talent strategy towards becoming a dynamic talent hub. Dr. Mustafa Kamal is a general practitioner with experience working in Clinic We Care. He is the spokesperson for the Hartal Doctor Contract Movement, which focuses on contract medical officers and doctors participating in a nationwide strike to draw attention to their limited prospects and benefits compared to counterparts in the permanent service. Without any delay, I will now pass the floor to the moderator, Mr. Ong Jiken, to kickstart the second session.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Ms. Shalini for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. Okay, so let's start now. Okay, so nowadays, as more and more people are discussing about the decent work or feeling very stressed. So, okay, may I ask Dr. Mustafa a question? So, what is the importance of decent work for all? And why should decent work be a right?
Right, thank you, dear moderator. Good afternoon to all, to the fellow speakers as well. So the question regarding decent work. So first, we have to understand the terms, the definition of decent work. If in accordance to the International Labour Organization, they define decent work as productive work for women and men in conditions of freedom, equity, security, and human dignity. So what is considered as a decent work? Number one, it has to have a fair income. Number two, it has to have a secure form of employment and safe working conditions. Number three, it ensures equal opportunities and treatment for all. Number four, it includes social protection for the workers and as well as their families as well. And number five, it offers a prospect for personal development and encourages social integration. And lastly, the most important part is for the workers themselves. where they are free to express their concerns and to organize. So in this definition itself, I think in Malaysia, we do have laws such as the Employment Act 1955 and also the OSH Act of 1994, where the employers themselves, they should be providing a safe workplace. And in the subsection of 15, it mentions that it shall be the duty of every employer and every self-employed person to ensure, as so far as practicable, the safety, health, and welfare at work of all his employees. So for me, in this definition itself, shows that how important it is for everyone to have a decent work, and the decent work itself must be safe for everyone. So I think this should be the fundamental rights, a human activist right, in terms of making sure that everyone is safe to express their concerns in terms of their workplace and as well in safety of their workplace as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mustafa, for your answer. Yes, I absolutely agree with you, especially you as you are supporting these contract doctors, and now most of them are fighting against COVID. Safety is the utmost importance for them, so that we can get out of the woods soon from this pandemic. Okay, so let's move on. So to the pretty Miss Izana. Hello, and I hope you're doing well.
I'm well,
okay.
Thank you. Hope you're well too.
Okay, my pleasure, Miss Izana. Okay, so I would like to ask, since we say that, okay, decent work is so important, so what are the initiatives that had been taken by the government in promoting and providing decent work in Malaysia? I'm curious about it.
Sure. Firstly, Mr. Ong, I want to extend our appreciation to you and the team of organizers for inviting Telencorp and myself to speak today. Thank you so much for spearheading this conversation. You've asked what are some of the initiatives that's been taken by the government in promoting and providing for decent work in Malaysia. So Malaysia, through the Ministry of Human Resources, as well as ILO, Malaysian Employers Federation, as well as the Malaysian Trade Unions Congress, they've been working on the Malaysian Decent Work Country Program, DWCP. So there's two phases to this program, and it provides a framework for each phase. So the phase one of this program actually supports the national efforts for us to achieve the 11th Malaysia Plan and the Sustainable Development Goals specifically by 2030. And in particular, the Decent Work Country Program will support Malaysia in implementing SDG 8, which is our focus for today, and in promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, as well as decent work for all. And to reinforce this link, the SDG 8 itself has been adopted as the overarching DWCP, or Decent Work Country Program goal. So the agenda is actually further reflected in the targets and the indicators that's listed out, beyond those of even just SDG 8. So we've got the Malaysia UN SDG framework for the period of 2018 to 2020, which further provides more framework to which the current DWCP aligns. And the UN SDG framework describes the joint work of all participating UN agencies, funds, programs, and also our country team here in Malaysia in support of our attainment of the 2030 Agenda and SDGs, as well as our country's goals towards becoming a high-income nation. So that's the main program that I would highlight in terms of the government's efforts. But if we dive in a little deeper to some of the key points I mentioned, one is about the government's commitment to SDGs. So they talk about the four main pillars of decent work agenda, as Dr. Mustafa mentioned earlier. You want to talk about employment creation, social protection, rights at work, and of course, social dialogue. These are all integral elements of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And Goal 8, our true north for today, talks about promotion of sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. As mentioned earlier, the full and productive employment, as well as decent work. And the implementation of Malaysia's government's commitment to achieving this SDG is underpinned in the National SDG Roadmap. There's 3 phases. Phase 1 starts 2016 to 2020. They talk about prioritizing SDGs in line with 11 Malaysia Plan. Second phase is 2020-2025. It focuses on the post-2020 goals and targets. And phase 3, 2025 to 2030, focuses on the remaining goals and targets in line with Malaysia's capacity and our global roles. There's a lot of oversight being provided by the governance structure, which was established in mid-2016. It comprises of ministries, agencies, civil society and all that. And how it looks like is that a National SDG Council is chaired by the PM, and there's a National Steering Committee with 5 SDG clusters, 17 task force, so very extensive. And they focus on encouraging public awareness, very much like what you're doing today. And they, focus on the online SDG portal, making sure there's direction and coordination and annual reporting. However, I know that everything that I've just shared about government initiatives sounds very high level at policy. And at the end of the day, it actually really depends on the people on the ground who's executing all this. So government has initiatives, has policy, has coordinating structures, but actually at the end of the day, it depends on you and me and everyone else in this conversation, whether on Zoom or live, to materialize our aspirations and goals for attaining sustainable economy and decent work. Back to you, Mr. Ong.
Okay, thank you, Miss Izana. Hearing a pretty answer from a pretty person. Okay, so yes, I agree with you. This roadmap and program is very extensive. It includes everyone. Yes, so since we know that everything sounds good on paper, it's not enough. And we have to see, we can only determine the effectiveness of a program by seeing its outcome, performance. So I would like to ask the third panelist here, the pretty Miss Shafika. Okay, so to what extent Malaysians are granted to enjoy the practice of decent work?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ong, and assalamualaikum to the fellow speakers. I totally agree. I think both speakers have mentioned about, the key terms, International Labour Organization, and I think Ms. Izana also have mentioned, and I think I totally agree that, there are many organization and even the government have implemented some sort of initiative. But I think, again, it's up to different organizations to actually implement it. I think if to a certain extent, Malaysians do get, the basic of practicing of decent work. I think Dr. Mustafa Kamal have mentioned about security in the workplace, social protection for families. I think employment rights such as salary, leave should be entitled. I think all those that are employed should have all those rights. So to a certain extent, we do have that basic. However, and then in addition with budget 2022, there is certain strategy to increase jobs. I think to initiatives such as Jamin Kerja Keluarga Malaysia have tried to, we're trying to have more people that can attain employment to decrease poverty, perhaps. But however, there is still a certain category of individuals that still are not able, or not given opportunity to actually practice decent work, maybe because of some condition. I think Ms. Shalini just now introduced me as somebody who I actually work with person with disabilities. And I think that's probably more of my specialty. I think speaking on behalf of person with disabilities, even though actually the Malaysian government has an affirmative policy for public departments to employ at least 1% of person with disabilities in their workplace. That 1% policy is still not mandated. There is such policy, but however, still, there are still not many employers that are actually hiring person with disabilities. And I think, again, it's a work in progress. And even though public sectors are open to hire person with disabilities, maybe, I think Ms. Izana just mentioned about giving more awareness, having more of this and creating, I think in order for it to be in order for Malaysians to practice decent work, I think more awareness needs to happen in order to achieve sustainable employment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shafika, for your eye-openers to me about the situation of person with disabilities working in Malaysia. Okay, so we have talked about everything related to our rights and also how much have we progressed. So I think because of the unlucky COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure income equality has become a distant dream for most people. So, and we can see that this Gini called efficient value increased to 0.407 in 2019, and I think this has been widened starting from 2020. So I'm wondering which sectors are facing the most serious income inequality. Okay, I would like to pass this question to Ms. Izana, who works in Talent Corp.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Ong. So, much like Ms. Nur Shafika, we have an area of specialty. I represent Talent Corp, but a lot of the work that I do is in gender equality movement or looking at gender inequality. So maybe I'll share some thoughts from two perspectives. One is the gender lens, which is very important because half the population, right? And another is from the economic activity perspective. If we look at the salaries and wages survey, the year 2020, that's done by DOSM, which is the Department of Statistics Malaysia. In general, the mean and median monthly salaries and wages for males are higher than females by 2.6 and 3.7% respectively. So if we want to talk about gender wage gap, over the last few years, women make about 72 cents to the dollar for every man. And this is when you compare equally, same level of education, same years of experience in the specific sector of industry, yeah? And this is Malaysian numbers we're talking about, but as we know, or rather I hope we all know, this is a global phenomenon. Women are, though highly qualified, especially in Malaysia, we make 68 to 73% of tertiary education graduates. We're not earning equal to our counterparts. So that's from a gender perspective. But if we look at economic activity, which is a bit more holistic, education remains with the highest median monthly salaries and wages in 2020 at about 5,000 plus, 5,058 actually. While human health, social work activities came in second, about 3,600, followed by information and communication activities with a median monthly salary and wages about 3,547. But during the same survey period, agriculture, surprisingly, because it is, we're so dependent on food security, but again, not surprisingly, because in this part of the world, we don't pay enough to the people who are providing us the food. We know this. The supply chain, it is usually the middleman and right to the end of the downstream that's actually making the most money. Our farmers, nelayan, petani, suma, they're not the ones getting the highest profit margin. We know this is a general well-known fact. So agriculture actually registered as the lowest in terms of median salaries and wages at 1,291. So a similar scenario was actually observed in the mean monthly salaries and wages in 2020, with education registered with the highest and lowest was agri. And I mean, this data is publicly available at DOSM. And you can see that the foundation of a nation, the people providing food on our table, we're not supporting them with the decent compensation. This has been an age-old issue in the agriculture industry, where those in charge of logistics and those further downstream at the F&B portion of the entire supply chain, they make the most profit. But truly the ones out there harvesting at the initial point of production at sea or land, they're not earning the highest income. And this is something that needs to be looked at by ministry, but also by industry players, say chambers of commerce, and those looking at pushing out agriculture conversations, FMM and things like that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Izana, for your answer. Yes, it is absolutely true in F&B industry. That's why a lot of people are calling for the reduction of the involvement of middlemen in the F&B industry. So,
and sorry, Mr. Ong, if I may add in a little bit. To be honest with you, we're 2021, almost kira 2022 lah, right? Couple of weeks. With the advancement of technology, number one, and the holistic view of digital economy, my personal hope, and I know a lot of industry people feel this way, is that we're able to download the technical expertise to the upstream players. So all the people we were talking about earlier within the agriculture sector, for example, for them to be able to have more autonomy when it comes to selling their products and therefore garner more profit margin in their salaries and wages. Because if they can control using tech, and tech has simplified a lot of things today, if they can control the way they manage their logistics, nowadays with a lot of platforms online, they can have more autonomy, not necessarily to weed out the middle people, but hopefully they can make more money that can support their living arrangements, their families, the children, put more food on the table in if they're in rural areas.
yes, Miss Izana, you're absolutely true. We can use ICT to help us. Okay, so since we already come up with which sector that faced the most serious income inequality, I think we cannot solve a problem by just knowing the problem. We have to brainstorm few solutions to solve it. Okay, so to Dr. Mustafa, who is actively involved in the Harta Doctor contract movement. So I would like to ask, how far are we to ensure equal pay for equal work of equal value for everyone in Malaysia? I'm sorry, Dr. Mustafa.
Yep. Yeah, I would like to echo Ms. Izana's comment just now. Actually, we are far, far away. Malaysia is far, far away from becoming a country with giving equal pay to everyone because of the gender bias, of the racial inequality as well. All right. So in terms of the policy, we in Malaysia, actually, we do have a lot of policy, a lot of acts that actually encompasses a lot of things. But I think it is due, like Ms. Izana said, it is due to the execution of the policy itself, which is the problem. We do have a lot of good policy. Even in this pandemic era, we do have the Traju policy, we do have the Penjana policy. But then in terms of executing it, because the main thing when the executive people are not doing the job properly, so this kind of policy, they cannot be spreaded out to all the employers and employees as well. So in terms of equal pay, actually under the Employment Act of 1955 and under the Ministry of Human Resources, workers covered under the Employment Act 1955 are all workers whose earnings do not exceed 2,000 ringgit a month, and all manual workers irrespective of their earnings. So meaning people who are working as professionals, we are not covered by labor law. Even for doctors, public servants, we are not covered by labor law. We are only covered by the OSH Act itself. So we are they can freely pay us whatever they want. For example, for me, for a contract doctor, if the government were to pay me 3,000, I will have to accept that because it's part of the contract. And when I sign the contract, I have to fully pledge the contract. But if you compare this to other countries from the EU itself or from Australia, we like to put Australia as our benchmark because they give the highest wage in the world, as I can remember. So if I'm not mistaken, in 2017, Australia recorded $16.50 per hour. So that is actually one of the highest earning wage in the country. In the world. So if you compare that to in Malaysia, for example, if you were to work in for myself, I worked before as a waiter in F&B industry before. So my monthly income was about 1,300. But if you were to cross-check that with the hours I'm working, I work about 12 hours a day with 2 hours break as per labor law. So I do think that it is not sufficient for me. So for people who are actually blue collar workers, they will feel that what they have been working for is not with what they are working for. All right. So meaning that they work a lot, but they get paid less. All right. So I think we are far away from becoming a country which we can say a developed country. We are still in the midst of developing country. Policy, I think the government has to enforce the policy properly so that everyone gets equal pay with sufficient work that they have done. So back to you, Mr. Ong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mustafa's answer. Yes, I agree with you. I once worked for a grocery store, and I was given only 1 day leave, and there are no paid leaves for me. So I think it's not sufficient, and I think we should improve on this. Okay, so anyway, since we have talked about income inequality, but I think that as humans, our life is not just about money. As you know, according to Abraham hierarchy of needs, we have 5 levels of needs. So I would like to ask Miss Izana, what types of right at work are the employees hoping for? For instance, reasonable working hours, safe and good working conditions, and social security and welfare benefits. Thank you.
Sure. I think through social media, a lot of what we do today, especially even right now, this program, social media is a very strong platform. But just through all of the social media network, the employees have been exposed to best practices, work practices from around the world, right? It's not very difficult for us to see what's standard practice or to ask friends or even strangers that on online platforms, what's some of the best practices around the globe. How can we benchmark as individuals, right? And many dream of having office environments like Google, Microsoft, and maybe other big MNCs for some. When we sit down and we converse with friends or mentees, for example, from NGO.
Sorry, Miss Izana, your line is unstable.
Working arrangement, for example, these are all not exactly new conversations. And some of those sorry, can you hear me?
No, your line is breaking. Your voice is breaking. I'm sorry, everyone. Please wait for a while as Miss Izana is facing some internet issues. Thank you for everyone's patience. Okay, I think, yes, I will move on to the next. Okay, since Miss Izana's internet issues are not resolved yet, so I will move on to the next question. Okay, so what to Miss Shafika, what is the dilemma that employees are facing while their rights at work are not granted?
Okay, so I think again I will. Of course, I think when many employees' rights are not guaranteed, it probably means that most of them will probably not attain jobs. I would speak again on behalf of person with disabilities. I would say that one of the dilemma would probably be a high rate of unemployment. I think like what Dr. Mustafa Kamal mentioned about now that not everyone is getting paid the same. Sometimes for some individuals, not just person with disabilities, it could also mean that they probably just accept any sort of jobs because it is they need that, they need the job. In terms of our support, because I'm a job coach for individuals, specifically for individuals with autism, so that is why our role is quite important. Just because they have that condition, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be given the same rights as other individuals. It's also based on their qualifications, but again, as what Dr. Mustafa Kamal mentioned, sometimes even qualification does not justify that. I think in terms of people with disabilities, I think there are still typical stereotypes that employers, I'm not saying all, I'm saying some employers still do not have that confidence to hire a person with disabilities. They probably feel that hiring them, it will probably not be a good factor for the company's economic growth. So again, like what I'll probably keep mentioning about this, I think it's about having the right awareness and spreading more awareness for most individuals to avoid all of these dilemmas. I think it's for all of us to practice more awareness and in order to achieve more sustainable employment.
Okay, so yes, thank you for Ms. Shafika's answer. Yes, I absolutely agree with you that PWD are facing difficulties in looking for a job, as most people will just shun them off by saying that they are too troublesome and they incurred high costs. So I feel pitiful of them, and I have a sense of empathy of them too. So let's see, how can government and private companies guarantee rights at work in different industries? So I would like to invite Mr. Mustafa to answer this. Thank you.
In terms of guaranteeing the rights of workers in different industries, I think first and foremost, the government has to set their foot down, put their foot down, and execute the policies that they have in the first place. And number two, we have to spread awareness, like Ms. Shafika said. We have to spread awareness. We cannot be compromising other people. For example, people with autism, there are types of different autism. There's sometimes what we call the high functioning autism as well. So I know there are good series in Netflix, if you can watch The Good Doctor. It portrays the autism doctor. So this kind of skepticism must be broken through in terms of the community itself. So I think the World Economic Forum has also came out with a good article. It mentions on how they will transform and make a decent work a reality to everyone. So the core of the article itself, it says that create a socially responsible and sustainable ecosystem by ensuring equitable sharing of risk rewards between employees and organizations. And therefore, they spread up into three different sectors. So firstly, it's about the workplace, the workers, and the work. So in terms of the workers themselves, they have to evolve and continue to evolving in terms of, we are now going towards the Industrial Revolution 4.0, where we are talking about artificial intelligence and so on. Nowadays, in terms of information, it is, I think, available at the tip of your fingertips. By pressing on Google, YouTube, you can study on how to do coding. You can study how to make videos, posters. You can study on how you want to study graphs and so on. So I think in terms of the workers themselves, they have to find the courses, and also they must improve themselves. And also, I think in terms of other respective organizations, I know there are a lot of NGOs, there are a lot of organizations who are championing issues for Down syndrome, for autism, and they too should be integrated into the workforce itself. And last but not least, I think government has to really enforce law because, as I mentioned before, in OSH Act 1994, it is the job of the employees to make sure the workplace of the employees is as far as practicable, meaning it has to be a safe environment for everyone, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their mental status. Everyone should get equal opportunities for everyone. Back to you, Mr. Ong.
Yes, my pleasure, Dr. Mustafa. Yes, I agree with you. Everyone should always improve themselves as this work is dynamic. A work won't stop for you or just continue rotating regardless of whether you are on idle mood or moving. So since we are hoping for a world or Malaysia where everyone has decent work and equal pay, but however, we can see that sometimes the way that our companies and government do is going against the grain, where like Dr. Mustafa is involved in the hard-down doctor contract movement, which shows that our government contract doctors are not being treated well. So, as a professionals, and also other kinds of labor such as 3D work. Okay, so what are the consequences of not providing decent work for all the industries in Malaysia, especially when you see that Malaysia is a developing country? So for instance, brain drain, happiness index. I would like to invite Dr. Mustafa to answer this question.
All right. In terms of the consequences, when we do not provide decent work for workers and for all professionals in Malaysia. So as you can see, I think in recent weeks, they have been publishing data from the news portal. There are a lot of doctors right now who are migrating, going to Australia, the United States, into the EU zone. All right. For example, I can give you a simple example. Dr. Amalina Bakri, she was a brilliant talent and we lost the talent to the UK. So I think in terms of the consequences itself, when we do not provide the capable framework for everyone, first and foremost, we will lose all our talents to other countries. For example, you see the unicorn company, Grab, they decided to shift their company to Singapore, and now they are listed into the US stock exchange. Why do they move their headquarters from Malaysia to Singapore? In terms of the policy itself, in terms of the workplace, the industry itself. And we do have the problem right now as we have this political instability, which is actually burdening us. It gives a great impact towards the GDP of our country. So in terms of the happiness index, that is the World Happiness Report that was published in recent months. So the topmost one is actually Finland, number one on the list. And as you can see in the report itself, our neighbors, Singapore, Thailand, they rank far, far above us in terms of happiness index. We are ranked 81 out of all the countries in the world. So for example, if I were to be happy, obviously the most important thing I think is about the environment, the quality of life. If I may share one video with all the speakers and all the attendees as well. There is a video on Facebook. I think it's quite comprehensive of what is happening today. So the world has three phases. The first phase was the Industrial Revolution. Basically, that was during our grandparents' time. And then the Information Revolution, that was during our parents' time. And now we are at the Social Revolution. So what are the differences between these three phases? In terms of in the Industrial Revolution, our grandparents, basically, they were working to put money, to put food on the table. So they were doing all these odd jobs, working in the factory, rubber tapping, and so on. All right. So then the time passed through, and now we were in the Information Revolution, where all these companies start to grow up. Nokia, we have the handphones and a lot of technologies, computer, internet. And now after that, there was basically our parents' time. So what their aim was actually to achieve the standard of living. So you have car, you have house, paying all the loans, making sure everybody, the children, are enrolled into university. And now we are in the social revolution, which is basically our time. So what we, the youth, actually want is actually quality of life. Because, information is now basically everywhere. It's available on the internet. You can just Google, you can just YouTube, like I mentioned. You can learn coding, even on YouTube. But certification is obviously most important in terms of making sure that the credentials are there. So I think in a nutshell, the most important thing for all of us is actually the quality of life. Workers nowadays, what they want is actually quality of life. They want work and life balance. They want good pay, and it is equal to what they have been working for. So I think if these issues are not addressed by the government, we will be keeping on losing talents out to our neighboring countries and also to other countries as well. So back to you, Mr. Ong.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa, for your great answer. Yes, what you say is what you say are absolutely true. Where we will be losing out where we have been losing out our talents to other countries since, in my if not mistaken, it will be 1970s since the implementation of new economic policy, and until now, when the pandemic emerged, and Malaysia is ranked, the Malaysia's economy ranked the lowest in Southeast Asia, and I am sure that most companies are already moving out from our country. So, okay, so just now, I think, yes, welcome, Miss Izana, to our Zoom.
Sorry about that. It's really heavy rain and thunderstorm at the moment, so I got disconnected. I'm using my phone hotspot now. Hopefully I don't get thrown off again.
Okay, hopefully everything goes well on your side. Okay, so I would like to invite you to continue answering your question.
Which question was this again? This is the rights at work. Yes, you're asking.
Yes,
that was where I got disconnected.
Yes, yeah, true.
I was sharing with everyone here and also those on our live streaming that we have access and we have exposure, even if you don't leave your room, for example, through tech, through the internet, through what people are sharing, where there's a lot of shared leadership, there's a lot of shared knowledge in today's day and age. We're being exposed to some of the best practices out there, and we're able to compare if our organizations have it or not. So for example, in Talent Corp, we advocate flexible working arrangement, FWA. It's quite prevalent on our website. We provide framework and structures for a lot of the corporations that we partner with. We engage industry, we support the employees by telling employers to cultivate flexible working arrangement. This was even before COVID period, yeah, with proper structure and process. And the reason is because you get the best out of your resources, your human resources, which is the most important resource that we can utilize in this day and age, by being flexible to their needs, and especially in a post-COVID world. So pre-COVID, we've already been advocating it. Post-COVID, we've been advocating for it some more. As for others, there are many, I'd say, aware individuals, institutions, organizations, and even from government perspective, where they're trying to support their employees. So a good example is People's Social Security. We look at EPF. It's one of the best structured pension schemes available in Malaysia. It's been around for a long time. And when you look at, say, for example, welfare benefits, there's so many capable organizations out there that are giving support. Talent Corp, we have many practices in place, but one, for example, is allowances are provided for employees who are above 40 to do, proper medical checkup, because a holistic human capital team is actually what drives organizations and therefore what drives economies. So we have to look at the individual needs, right? And I'm sure over here, I know that the demographic given by the organizers is that there's a lot of young people here, but I'm not sure who's joining us on live stream, and also from the other speakers' perspective, that we're all looking into providing strong, good, well-networked and caring environments for our people. It requires a lot of organization transformation, I'd say, in today's day and age. But after everything we've been through for the last 2 years, especially for our frontliners, I think they were our warriors through the difficult 2 years. I think empathetic leadership needs to be embodied, whether it's by the senior most person in an organization or everybody at every single level. We all have a certain responsibility and leadership to show. And I feel like ensuring that decent work and work environments available comes with having a lot of empathy in each of us, in each of our respective leadership. It's whether we make the environment good for our people and whether we make them able to stay long and sustainable.
Okay, so thank you to Miss Izana for your answer. Yes, I agree with you. We should provide enough rights, and also we should ensure enough rights, and also the most important thing is empathetic leadership. Yes, this is what is lacking in the modern society, where people are just driven by money and performance, and they're hardly being empathetic. And I think that is, we should change it, as a change can bring bigger impacts. This is what we should have in our mind. So I have another question that is related to it. So what can we do to alleviate or prevent the aforementioned consequences? I would like to pass this question to Dr. Mustafa.
In terms of how to prevent, it's actually quite a dynamic role for everyone to play in, actually. So in terms of the government itself, they have to put their foot down. They have to relook back on their policies, find the right people to execute their policies, and to make sure the law is enforced, to ensure that the workplace itself is decent and it's safe for everyone to work. In terms of the employers, they have to have their moral values and also the human values to provide good pay, ample pay, and good quality of life to all their workers. And in terms of the community itself, they have to spread awareness and to break all this capitalism in terms of racial inequality, in terms of the gender discrimination, in terms of also the mental status of everyone. I mean, people who has depression or people who has a panic attack should also be given a chance. People who have autism or people who have Down syndrome should also be given a chance. It should be given equal rights to everyone. And in terms of the individuals, we ourselves, we should be always evolving and trying to adapt to the current situation. So as we are now preparing to go to Industrial Revolution 4.0, where we will be talking about metaverse, what Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg has told us. We'll be talking about metaverse, we're talking about crypto. So I think the skills that we should have, we should be always upskilling ourselves to ensure that we are at the correct place and the correct time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Dr. Mustafa. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, our government, especially the ministers, they should not just sit at the office or just talking about Keluarga Malaysia or something like Sejahtera or something else, to just do a window dressing of Malaysia, which is a very caring country. Yeah, they should go to the ground and prove that they are upholding Keluarga Malaysia principle with the walk the talk principle. And besides that, yes, I also agree with you. We cannot just 100 blame the government for everything that failed. The employees should also upskill themselves so that when you expect people to respect you, you have to respect others. Yes, this is the right way to go for a better Malaysia. Okay, thank you, No Hasina. Okay, so I think Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay, so since we have been saying that we have to upskill ourselves, and also saying that, okay, yes, the government should provide decent work. Okay, so some people think that we came out with a solution, hybrid work model, where we combine online working and offline working, which some says that we can spend more time with our family, which leads to a better work-life balance. So I'm wondering, does a hybrid work model help to promote or suppress decent work? Okay, so I would like to pass this question to Miss Izana.
Thanks, Mr. Ong. Honestly, I think this depends on the industry. For regular industries, like those of us who are predominantly using the net and we're privileged enough to use Zoom and doing webinars and things like that. I do think that a hybrid model really works. I have to be honest with you. During COVID period, I pivoted a lot of our business plans to accommodate the world changing, and it turned out to be the most productive year in terms of the impact that we managed to achieve. But having said that, some industries, hybrid doesn't work for them. It's just not the nature of that industry. So whilst naturally, and also in my own personal experience, I would say, yes, definitely go for it. And this is the future. I think in the spirit of being holistic and thinking of all our friends in other industries, I'd say it really depends. It depends on the industry. If you are in agriculture, what does hybrid really mean? So for us, if you're in corporate world, it's very easy to picture what hybrid looks like, right? Okay, stay at home and go in the office when we need to, so we can take care of the kids. And we become completely result oriented because now my time is my own. I deliver to you what I promise, but you're not watching me 9 to 5. But it works because this is this computer, the screen in front of me is the basis of how I work and deliver. But what about other industries? So I think, to be fair, my answer to you is it really depends. It needs a deeper conversation. What works for each industry and what are the goals of that specific part of the supply chain?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Ms. Izana, for your enlightenment. Yes, I totally agree with you. Working online, when we are working online, we do not have to endure the so-called KL traffic that is notorious among people who are staying in Kuala Lumpur or Klang Valley. So when you don't need to endure this traffic jam, of course, you have more time to enjoy your time, such as baking.
And to be honest with you, it's a lot easier in terms of cost management as well. So I'll give you an example from my NGO's perspective. We go in and we do a lot of leadership training for young women and girls, right? Prior to COVID, I placed a huge amount of importance on training young girls face-to-face because I want to read your body language. If you are hesitant, especially kita punya Asian culture, I want to be able to talk to you and bring out your confidence. But I need to see you face-to-face. Very hard to detect that from just shoulder upwards on Zoom, right? But during COVID, we didn't have a choice. And so we, converted, and when you're trying to conduct training sessions online, you have to do a lot more things than the regular stuff you take for granted when you're running face-to-face training. Here, you need to make sure there's music, there's games. How do you keep everyone entertained? How do you manage the breakout room? How many people do you have watching? Who's the tech shiro? But we didn't have a choice, and I had to continue the work of the NGO, so we did. But the silver lining there is we managed to, number one, take on way more mentees. We also got to train way more mentors because the mentors are like, okay, I just now need to spend time in front of my computer instead of traveling to places with you. I can still take care of my kids. My mentors, sometimes they're breastfeeding their kid because they just gave birth while they're mentoring my students from other universities. So, within our realm, we were really able to manage and take advantage of this hybrid model. I ended up doing training kat Kelantan, kat Terengganu, everything all online. But yeah, and for us, we save so much cost on logistics. It was a Zoom account only, right? And maybe sending like, token t-shirts and stuff like that. But I didn't have to pay for flights, I didn't have to pay for gas, didn't have to pay for food, and things like that. So it really depends on industry, but thankfully, like the industry I'm in, I managed to really capitalize on tech.
Yes. Thank you, Miss Izana, for your eye-openers. Yes, I totally agree with you, especially when we are attending international conferences where we can just save maybe a few $100 or few $1,000 on airfares and also the premium hotel rates. Okay, but besides that, this is only applicable for the management level. Yes, I totally understand. And so since we have seen the good side of the hybrid work model and also the downsides, so what are the short-term and long-term actions to make decent work a culture in Malaysia? So I would like to ask this question to Ms. Shafika. Okay, and I'm sorry to inform you all that we still have 14 minutes to go.
Okay, sure. I will try to make it short. I think short-term actions need to be started in order for long-term actions to happen. I think what needs to happen, I think Dr. Mustafa Kamal and Ms. Izana have mentioned a lot, about collaboration, awareness, collaborating with different organizations. I think that is needed in order for it to happen. Briefly, let me just talk about I'm working in Yayasan Gamuda. There's this program called Enabling Academy, and our hashtag or our keyword is promoting sustainable employment. And how do we do that? We actually we are an employment transition program that is when individuals with autism, when they get accepted into our program, it's free of charge, fully sponsored by Yayasan Gamuda. And what we do is we train them before they go for employment. We train them for readiness for before they go to work, and the support is free. And once we place them into our partner companies, for your information, in Gamuda, we have 20 employees with autism working across 18 departments. And on top of that, we do work with more than 30 partner companies. Some are really big corporate companies, big banks, and some are Sindang Berhad sort of companies. And we do not just support individuals with autism when they are at work. We actually also support employers. Because as I have mentioned, some of these employers, it's not that they do not want to hire person with disabilities. Maybe they don't feel confident. I want to hire them, but I don't know if I'm getting the support that is needed. So that's where we come in. We are trying to promote sustainable employment. Once we place person with disabilities into employment, we don't just say, okay, bye, talk to you. Never. We actually still give that ongoing support. On top of that, we are giving awareness to partner companies. We're collaborating with not just private sectors. And currently, I totally agree with Ms. Izana, because even during COVID-19, we had to do a lot of online training and, training with individuals with autism. Again, we cannot see the body language and everything, but the program needs to happen. Sustainable need to happen, right? So we do give awareness session to partner companies, and we are currently working with Ministry of Education, specifically the Bahagian Pendidikan Khas or Special Education Department, and we are also working with Department of Social Welfare. So it's not just the private sector that's getting this awareness, is also public sector. We're trying to collaborate with both parties, and that's our hope for long-term actions. And I think in general, I just feel that maybe, if more for different specialties, if more organizations have this some sort of, program to be the middle person, so both parties can meet, I think that will probably help for a long-term goal.
Okay, so thank you to Miss Shafika for eye-openers on how Gamuda helped these autism workers extensively, even until the level of Ministry of Education. Yes, I totally admire this. So, for the last question, I would like to end this panel discussion with this last question. In one sentence, how would you describe Malaysia where decent work is provided for all especially to Ms. Shafika, where you have been working tirelessly to help the autism workers. So what would you describe?
Okay, I think in one sentence, it's still a work in progress. I think that's probably the best answer. I've been in this field for almost a decade. I think awareness is definitely there, but now I think there's a favorite quote that it's now we want, like, inclusivity is invited to a party. Now we want to invite them to dance. So that's our role. We want to, awareness is there, social media, everything. They're all having all that. But now let's implement that. Let's invite inclusivity to the party.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so how about others? You all have any thoughts on this? Maybe Dr. Mustafa, would you like to, or maybe Miss Izana, would you like to describe?
We'll give Miss Susanna first.
I see both of us unmuting at the same time. To be honest, I think Miss Shafika wrapped up the session really well for us. When you said work in progress, I saw the smile on my face and Dr. Mustafa's smile. I think you shared exactly our sentiment. And I love that phrase you said. What was that? We've invited inclusivity to the party. Now we wanted to dance, to take action, right? I'm going to have to give it to Ms. Shafika. I think she wrapped it up perfectly. And I'm in full support. We have a lot more ways to go, and thanks to social media, online platform, people like you today, the organizers of today's session, you are increasing the awareness. So thank you, and kudos actually goes to you. And I hope that it doesn't stop here today. I hope that there's more and bigger events like this so that we can equalize our playing field so that Malaysia becomes a world-class nation that we deserve to be, and we're working hard towards. So yes, I think Ms. Shafika said it perfectly.
Yes, thank you, Miss Izana and Miss Shafika, for your perfect wrap up. Yes, I totally agree with both of you, where inclusivity is the key to provide decent work. As if you want to provide decent work, you have to provide it indiscriminatively. If not, that is not called decent work. That is just called biased work. Okay, so how about Dr. Mustafa? Since you are actively involved in Hatau doctor contract, I am sure you have a lot of thoughts on a Malaysia where decent work is provided for all.
I echo Ms. Shafika and Ms. Izana's comment. I think there's nothing much to add. But most important right now is more towards the awareness. We have to spread awareness to everyone so that everyone understands and be inclusive to all the actions are taken. That's all.
So thank you, Dr. Mustafa's brief yet concise wrap up. Okay, so this marks the end of our panel discussion. So I would like to pass the floor to our MC. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Ong, there is a Q&A session that you have to conduct.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you, MC. Okay, so now we will move on to our Q&A session. Okay, so before this, I would like to thank everyone's active participation in our panel, in our workshop, in our forum. Yeah, I see a lot of questions coming up. Okay, so there's one. The first question is, wow, this question looks great. Okay, so do the laws or policies in place set a standard for decent work in public and private companies? Okay, so I would like to direct this question to Dr. Mustafa.
So as for the law, it's actually all private and public workers, as long as they are working besides armed forces or working at the sea, they are all under the OSH Act of 1994. because armed forces and also people who are working at the sea, they have other acts and other ordinance covering them. But in terms of the Employment Act itself, it does not apply to government servants because we have what we call ex gratia. So we don't have the Employment Act, but we have the other undang-undang untuk orang yang bekerja dekat public sector. But otherwise, I think there's nothing much yang I can comment in terms of the undang-undang itself. But then we have to understand that public servant, diorang punya undang-undang are quite different from the private sector. That's all.
So may I ask, will this be an effective mechanism, or how can it be made better?
So like I mentioned before, I think they have to revise back the policies and the act itself, because Employment Act, I don't think Employment Act should just be to the workers who are working, who are earning less than 2,000, or workers who are doing manual works. I think it should be covering everyone, professionals included as well, because that is where the equality starts. Because if we were to give one act to another party and the other act to another party, because those two are different acts, so they will give different consequences.
Okay, so thank you. Yes. Okay, so I think it is very good. So besides that, I think everything on the paper looks nice, but we can only determine the effectiveness by seeing how it goes on. So is there anything, as we know that Malaysia, I know that lack of execution is a main problem here, which is hindering our progress. So is there anything we can do about the lack of execution? Perhaps it may be helpful for the status of decent work of each company to be made a piece of public information to encourage employers to implement decent work for recognition. Okay, so maybe I will just summarize it. Okay, so what we can do about the lack of execution?
I think this question should be answered by Ms. Zana.
Thanks. So the question is, what should we do about the lack of execution, or what I understood as poor implementation? Is that correct? So one thing, I mean, I'm sure with different industries, whether it's a joke or a reality, I'm not sure how we want to take it, but often it is said in Malaysia, we're really good at doing world-class policies. I mean, let's be frank here, we have some really good policies there, but our implementation is really poor. This is the frank truth, and I apologize if it hurts anyone's feelings. But the only way for us to get better is to have a frank assessment of where we are today. A lot of what creates better implementation is strong direction.
Sorry, Miss Izana, your voice is breaking. I think.
So whether it's the lead of. Oh no! Again, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's crystal clear.
Okay, sorry. I cannot control Mother Nature. Okay, I'm gonna make it short and sweet. Essentially, choose the right leader. Whether it is in your organization, whether it is in government or whatever it is, the right leader with the right personality. Often we talk about the theoretical bits, right? But we don't talk about how important it is a leader's personality in implementing the work. Getting A to Z done, it really is about your leader's personality. So choose wisely. And I don't mean just like general elections in government. I mean, even in your own organizations, find ways to highlight where have the courage to highlight where there are incompetencies. Of course, maybe don't get yourself fired in the process, but we must be very clear about being efficient and meeting our goals. And honestly, for that, in my humble experience, it is always somebody's personality. Are they dogged about getting something done when they say that they will? Or are they okay, just paruh jalan aja? For me, I don't like leaders separuh jalan. I want someone who finishes their work. When they say they will, they start A to Z sampai habis.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Miss Izana. The separuh jalan is how to say, it's something cancerous in our government's management. That's why
But it's not just government. Sometimes it is a culture, the tidak apa attitude or things like that. So even I understand we have a 19 to 21-year-old demographic today. So even when you are running teams, right, your group exercises and all that, appoint leaders who you know will finish where their word is their honor and they finish the work and they lead till the end, right? And that's what we should expect from friends who are in our working groups and university level, right until senior level in government. Kata mesti di kota, word is their honor. So they must finish the work. We must set that benchmark as individuals so that as an entire society, hopefully we don't have, like what Mr. Ong said, the cancerous attitude anymore, but something more holistic and we become really first-class society.
Yes, I totally agree with Ms. Izana. When we choose leaders, we should not choose based on, oh, because he is my best BFF, or I choose him. This is not about going for hangout. This is about berkhidmat untuk masyarakat. So you have to think about the society first when you choose your leaders. Okay, so I see a second question. Also, is there any available platforms for voices of so oppressed in the work stream to be heard without fear of being sacked due to ex-employer biases? Okay, so I would like to direct this question to Ms. Shafika, as you have been helping these autism workers a lot.
Okay, so the question is if there's a place for someone to talk about, right? Just not just for individuals with autism or PWDs. It could, I think, if we're talking about organization, it could be, of course, main person is probably the human resource. I am sure there is some sort of law of working in a corporate company. I'm sure your HR person is probably someone that you can talk to if there are any issues, or if your supervisor or your manager is not treating you right, or your pay is not supposed to be how it is. But in terms of if I want to talk about individuals that I have worked with, that I have trained, my graduates who after they finish our program, the department, we do actually, when we place them to our partner companies, of course we would actually communicate with the human resource staff. That's someone that that we look into, if they're given their employment letter, we read through that. And I think in anything for future staff, I know most of you here are still in your maybe 20s or 21. You're probably going to start working soon. I think before you work, please read any sort of policy that you have to sign. That's very important. But then if for your voice to be spoken, again, like I agree what Ms. Insana said, find the right leader. And I think if your leader is supposed to listen to you, supposed to know if you have any issues, or there's any issue that you have, then you should actually voice it out. For individuals with autism, the graduates that I support, of course, we are the job coach. We are there to support them if there are any issues that they are facing. We are there to help. And if we need that support from HR, then we would communicate with HR.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ms. Shafika. Yeah, thanks for your great answer. Yes, we should voice out. If not, our superiors are not inside our mind, so they will know whether we are being oppressed or not. So voicing out is like opening a door to our mind for them, so that they can see the truth inside our mind. Okay, so let's go to a third question. Okay, so what can workers do if they get underpaid for their work, or when they are required to work extra long hours, or we call it as OT, overtime, and this is not required by contract without pay? So I would like to direct this question to Ms. Izana.
Could you repeat the question again? What should they do if they are underpaid?
Yeah, it's true. And besides that, what can the workers do if they're required to work OT, which is not required by contract without pay?
So the first question is if they are underpaid, you need to make a report. Firstly, of course, judging by this demographic, I think if you are negotiating for your first job, number one, I'd say always practice. Before you go into negotiations, there's always homework to be done, meaning checking market rates, checking your value based on qualifications, years of experience. Some people have internship and not. So number one, always do your homework before you go in. And number two, never answer within the interview session itself. Always come out, give yourself the space to double confirm certain bits of information. Say you want to check whether you are underpaid or not, whether you are valued properly by the HR of the companies. So those are the things you want to do beforehand. But let's say you've already signed the contract or you realize that actually you're underpaid. You have to bring this up with HR, but always make sure that you are backing your statements with facts. Yeah, you've done your research, you are showing documentations, and I'm sure they teach you this, how to find sources that are credible. In today's day and age, there's a lot of information online, but not all are credible sources. So make sure whatever you use as proof and support for your stance, that they come from credible sources. So always fight for what you are worth. If the HR doesn't comply with it, then you might have to file an official report. What was the second part of the question, Mr. Ong?
Okay, I think the second part of the question is similar to the first one. It's about what can a worker do when he's required to work OT,
OT,
and
yeah.
that is not required by contract and without pay.
So actually, this is an interesting question, and something I was thinking about over the last few months. In today's day and age, a lot of woke conversations are happening online about boundaries, right? There's a very sweet spot between establishing our boundaries, especially if sometimes because you have access to screen, employers think that you're available all the time. And that's really not healthy for your mental capacity, that there has to be some boundaries, right? And then there's the other end of the spectrum where you also need to get the job done. The frank truth is, in the reality of getting work done, not everything gets done between 9 to 5, right? It's the frank truth across industries. So what is that? You need to identify, this might take a bit of time for you to test. What is that sweet spot between being a responsible employee and getting it done? Remember, just now we spoke about you yourself are a leader. Just because you're not C-level doesn't mean you are not a leader. You're leading your team, you're leading your task. So ensuring that you finish A to Z, what has been tasked you. So essentially being result-oriented. And sometimes that may go into your OT. And then on the other side of the spectrum, making sure you still maintain boundaries so that it doesn't affect your mental health and also your personal family time. I found that the answer to that is really, number one, effective time management. That's a skill we all need today because a lot of things are being left to us to work under flexible work arrangement, right? So number one is good time management. And number two is really having the courage to voice out. So similar to what I said to your first question, how do you have the courage to voice out to authorities, i.e. HR, or maybe even bigger authorities, if you are not paid your necessary OT that you have demonstrated? So the answer to that is always have supporting documents to show the hours you're working. In some firms like consulting, you have timesheet, right? You're always measuring. So how do you measure and how do you keep track? How do you always cover your back to make sure that, yes, I will put in, I'll finish the work because, I'm result oriented, but still getting your worth for the work that you have put in. So do your homework before you go into any conversations, have backup documents to show the kind of the quality and time volume of work you've put in. That'd be my advice.
Yes, thank you, Miss Izana, for your precious advice, as I know that most people will just miss out on this as they think that this is something macam remeh lah. So yeah, a lot of people just tend to ignore it. And I think, yeah, another thing is also the time management part. This is very important. As you know, the biggest nation in the world is procrastination. Yes, as most people tend to say, it's okay, we still have a lot of time. Okay, we just scroll through Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Next thing you know, 4 hours has passed by.
Yes, I agree with you. Especially when you have work, then when you say, even though when your boss gives you very little work, and I'm sure when you procrastinate, you will always say that there's no good work-life balance. So please back up your time management skills so that you can have good work-life balance, even though you are coupled with maybe 12 or 20 works, but I don't mean that everybody should do so much work. Okay, so I'll move to the next question. Should there be any transparency of minimum wages or the range of wages in certain job? Okay, I would like to ask this question to Ms. Shafika.
Transparency. Okay, so transparency between minimal job, is it? I mean, minimum wage, right? I think, I think what Dr. Mustafa Kamal have mentioned today, we already know what is the minimum wage. I think there's no hidden, it's not a secret, right? Now it's just about if companies are actually not providing that. It's about our own action, and of course it's something that, if we need to complain about it. I think this question probably best for Dr. Mustafa Kamal, because he's practicing this right now. Yeah, maybe I'll pass it to you.
Yep, sure. Under the Employment Act of 1955, I know a lot of acts because I'm actually studying and practicing for occupational health. So yeah, because this is part of the part of my job scope as well. So under the Employment Act, usually there is a calculation on how you want to calculate what's the amount of minimum wage you should be getting at the end of the month, and also cross checking it with the number of days you are working. All right. So like Ms. Shafika said, it's not a hidden secret, but I think it's about more towards awareness and people not understanding. The literacy in our community is quite poor actually in terms of understanding the contract itself. So kebanyakan kita, bila kita dapat contract, we don't really read through the contract, kita terus sign. That's a problem. Before you want to sign, you have to read the terms and conditions from A to Z. Give your employer some time, tell them that you want to understand and read the contract properly, because there are usually hidden clauses that we usually kita tak baca, kita overread. So when there are hidden clauses, so when we want to fight, contoh macam the question just now, if we are in the contract, kita tak ada sebut pasal overtime ke apa, tapi ada satu hidden clause, you have to abide in accordance with the company punya policy. Contoh kalau company tu kata, okay, dia nak tukar working hours, and it's up to their discretion without telling you. Maksudnya itu hidden clauses yang dibenarkan dalam kontrak. That's why before kita nak fight apa semua, we have to have that facts. And also kita kena ada that understanding before kita nak buat kontrak. I don't think wage is now a hidden knowledge. Cumanya if you are talking about underpay, yes, most of the workers in Malaysia, I think is underpaid.
I think, sorry, and just to add for that, for our the support that I give, this is very important, because as a job coach too, I mean, yes, because I do work with high functioning autism. One is even an engineer. I mean, it's very important for us to advise them as well. What Dr. Mustafa Kamal, we need to let them read the policy and read their contract carefully. Yeah.
Okay. So thanks everyone, all the panelists, for your great discussions and also answers. But however, I would like to say that our Q&A session will come to an end now. Okay, so thank you everyone for your active participation, and also the speakers for your insightful sharings. I hope to see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ong.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ms.
Mr.
Shafika.
Ong. Thanks,
Thank you.
Shalini.
Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ong, for the great moderation of session 2. Thank you to all the speakers for your participation and the perceptive comments into this most important topic that I know affects all of us here. So before we end our event, I now invite the director of the Next Normal, Ms. Hui Li Juan, to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you, Shalini. We hope everyone here enjoys today's session and learns a thing or two about the 8 Sustainable Development Goals, decent work and economic growth. Only few messages need to be delivered. Do remember, besides economic growth, we shall always pay enough attention to sustainability. And also, hopefully, decent work will be a culture in Malaysia. When an employee is asking for a decent working environment, the society would not label him as a demanding and ungrateful employee. Instead, we can all realize that decent work not only benefits employees, but it is for the betterment of everyone. We sincerely hope that sustainable economic growth will be a progress and decent work will be a culture in the next normal. Before I end my speech, on behalf of the Next Normal project team, I would like to express our sincerest gratitude to the keynote speaker, all the speakers and moderators for accepting our invitation and bringing us 2 insightful and amazing sessions. Of course, a big shout out to the committees. Without you all, the Next Normal wouldn't be a success. Last but not least, thank you ASEAN Youth Organization for giving me this opportunity, and thank you to all the participants for joining today's webinar. That's all from me. Back to you, Shalini.
Thank you, Ms. Hui Li Juan, for the awesome closing remarks. So as a modern way of keeping memories, we now move on to the photo session. We would like to request your kind cooperation to turn on your cameras while my colleague Vidya takes the screenshots of this event. Vidya, you may proceed.
Maybe Shalini, you can proceed with the photo taking. Yeah, on your account, and we will take the group photo.
All right, okay. So smile, 3, 2, 1. Okay, again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, then this marks the conclusion of this event. Dear participant, please be informed that attached in the poster shared is the QR code for participants to provide feedback on our event. Alternatively, you may access the link through the chat-in function. Participants are required to fill it up, as we would love your input on how we can improve. And only by filling the 2 attendance forms and the feedback form will the participants be given the e-certs via email later. That is all from me. Thank you all for attending this webinar. Take care and stay safe.